is Aeternum Radio, broadcasting from the peaks of Shattered Mountain to the New World.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Aeternum Radio. I am your host Slacker, joined as always by my two co-hosts, Big Papa.
Howdy.
And Ruko.
Hey everyone.
Today we've got some really great stuff we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about a little bit about the news. We'll dive into a feature review. The feature that we're going to be talking about today is Expeditions. Expeditions are the New World's version of dungeons. So we're going to look a little bit more in depth with that and what's been talked about and what we can look forward to. And then we're going to go into a little bit of the lore, and specifically we want to talk about what some of those dungeons are talking about, why we're there, what's kind of the story that's unfolding there. And finally, we want to get into a bit more of an opinion about dungeon design, how you do that well, and what are some of the better ways to go about creating a good, engaging dungeon for an RPG in general, let alone an MMO. A couple of announcements before we get started. So we now have a Discord channel, so you can check out that link. It's going to be in the description of this episode, along with on our Twitter account and kind of wherever. Get involved with there, be involved in that Discord channel, because we're going to be having polls and voting and all kinds of stuff to kind of get you engaged and make up our names and where we're going to play, so you can come and join and be a part of us. We also have another really cool news, is that Danny is going to be joining us. He's another great content creator within the New World community. You can find him on Twitch and on Twitter, and we'll have to link some of his information when we have him here on the show. He'll be joining us next week, which we're really excited about. And finally, the last announcement is that we're going to start streaming some of these episodes on Twitch. Today, we are streaming it, and we've got some questions even coming in right now asking, do we have alpha access? Yes, we only I have alpha so far, but we will all have beta access, and that'll be really, really exciting. But if you want to follow us along when we do stream it, you can find Aeternum Radio. You can follow the Slacker Project. That's my personal channel, and I'll be linking these, and you can ask questions, you can give additional thoughts, and oftentimes as we finish recording, you can find us, once we're done recording, we kind of have additional thoughts, and you can kind of catch in and listen in on those as well. Any other announcements or things I forgot in that opening blurb?
No, not that I can think of. Not a ton of new stuff coming out, so.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Cool. Well, let's dive into the New World news. Not a ton has been released so far. They've kept pretty quiet, and honestly, we were kind of anticipating this. They're really over there at the studio. You can bet your bottom dollar they're going to be doing crunch time, right? This is the time where they're going to be making sure that all the bugs are out and that they've polished all the systems that they want. They've got those alpha keys that went out last week, and getting that player feedback and fine tuning all those systems. We doubt we'll see any other major updates until launch. Which we're really excited for, which will be happening on the 20th of July is when you can get access to the beta if you have pre-ordered it. Other than that, you got to wait for the release later in August.
I'm actually expecting some changes for the beta, like patch notes, differences from the alpha.
Do you think they'll be extensive, though?
Not extensive, but I'm sure they're going to get some of the feedback from the alpha and put it into the beta. That would be my guess, at least.
And bug fixes, but I don't think anything major.
No, probably not any major content updates, but
yeah.
They do have some systems that I'd love to see tweaked a little bit, which we can't go into the details now, but I hope we can talk about this more once the beta comes out, so we can say, oh gosh, this was really great, or this was really rough, and how it's changed, because like I mentioned before, I had the opportunity to play the alpha before the preview event, and the game has dramatically changed since then. So it's really been an evolution, and it's really kind of normalized to what we have now, but which is great, which I think is still great. Okay, so let's dig into our primary topic of today, which is going to be about expeditions. So a couple of months ago, New World released a big video, Expeditions 101. It's been talked about in their deep dive. And basically, it comes with a couple of key features. They want their expeditions, which is like a dungeon crawl, right, for you and a couple buddies, to go through and slay bosses and just have fun with it, right? They created, okay, so here's our vision. They have these three main pillars for their vision. One is they want an attainable social experience. And we're going to talk about all three of these. Attainable social experience. 2, a new PvE experience. And 3, they want something that's unique and engaging. So that's their 3 pillars that they've created. And so let's talk about attainable social experiences. Anywhere between 3 to 5 players can go into these dungeons. They're typically tuned for 5 players, and it's a cooperative content that will include challenges, puzzles, and bosses that you got to clear through in order to get to the end. Finally, this is going to be a new PvE experience, so there's going to be a lot of unique mechanics, bosses, and loot that gives a real good change of pace from the other activities you might be doing on a day-to-day. So if you pretty regularly are engaging with their PvE content, or you're out farming a lot, when you go do a dungeon, it should feel very fresh and very different from the other content you've been doing. And then finally, they want it to be unique and engaging. Each expedition should have its own story and experience. Now, before we go into the 2 dungeons that they've already talked about, I want to ask you guys, is this enough? Is this enough of a feature, or is this something that feels kind of tacked on? Because my personal belief is, when I played other MMOs, even other RPGs, dungeons or expeditions are a really integral part of that whole system, right? It's the way they tell their stories. It's the way that you really engage with the world. Has this been tacked on, or is this something we're really looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to it. I do feel like it's a little bit tacked on. And I think it's mostly to engage more of the PvE crowd. Not everybody wants to do PvP, which is understandable. But they have developed this just in the last year alone. This is completely brand new. It wasn't in the game at all.
Yeah.
So I mean, starting this entire system from scratch would be a difficult thing, and so I until we actually play it, I don't know how great it's going to be, but I think the main point is to attract more people to the game by having a more PvE side to it.
Yeah, just based on what I know about the game, it definitely feels like it was tacked on. You could easily argue that just because it's something they introduced, like Ruko said, within the last year. And this was originally a very PvP-focused game.
Right.
I was actually reading through some of the old Reddit posts from, when this was first announced, and their concern, a lot of the people's concerns. It's hopefully they do it well. From what I've seen in the videos too that I've watched, is that they were easy. The people that were able to access it and play it and talk about it, that was the common thread, was that it was easy. So there's a concern, like my biggest concern is that because this is a action-oriented combat system, right? It's not tab targeting. It naturally has a higher skill cap, and it was originally designed for PvP, right? So the concern is, are they going to have to make these dungeons easy just to accommodate the lower skilled players, the players who are more casual? Are they going to do that and ultimately make it unfun for the players that are more dedicated? And that's just looking at the skill cap. And then if you consider, well, okay, these abilities are, originally were designed for PvP. How are our skills going to translate? Our ability buttons, right? How are they going to translate into a PvE dungeon? So those are some concerns I would say I have.
So I think those are really fair concerns, and I think they balance out. You talked a little bit about the upside and the downside there a lot. So the upside here is that they've brought a very unique action combat system to, an environment that is usually based in tab targeting. It is, right? But that general feedback that it's kind of easy is a big red flag. If these expeditions are what they say they are, and they're supposed to be very challenging, I'm very on board for very difficult content inside PvE. If I'm doing PvE, I want it to be very hard. I want the AI to be very difficult to outwit or outmaneuver or engage. That's why Dark Souls is so great, right? When I'm engaging with that game, it's really hard to beat, and I like that. That's what makes PvE, in my opinion, that's what makes PvE so good. And with a combat system like New World, we can get that, right? We can experience that.
I hope. I hope
Yeah,
it's not just. I hope it's
yeah.
not just the same just different models, but really the same mechanics every time, in a boss fight. And I don't think that's what they're gonna do, obviously, but that there's definitely concerns with the game style, and they're trying to, mix this action combat with traditional dungeon PVE. There's that
Yeah.
concern for sure.
Well, and that's the other part. In case you're not aware, the expeditions that New World has set out have turned out to be tank, healer, DPS, right? That's what it's going to be. So that whole aspect of it,
The Trinity.
right? Yeah, the Trinity is. I kind of wanted a little bit more in it. New Worlds feel very unique, very different. I was kind of hoping for a little bit more there. But I'm okay that this is something that it's like, hey, we want to bring more people to have, something to change up from your regular day-to-day. Okay, all right, I'm down for that.
Now, these are instanced, right? These are instanced
They are.
dungeons.
Right,
Yeah.
so you got to go to the portal, you get inside, and then you're good to go until you get to the end of it. Man, if they weren't instanced, okay, that would be pretty darn cool. But I mean, I don't know if that's
There's
actually
pros and
realistically
cons.
happen.
There's pros and cons. I think they could easily have multiple kinds of dungeons in this, that instance and non-instanced, and that would be kind of cool to as you're adventuring, you discover a dungeon that's not listed somewhere, that's not instance. You can go in and explore it, maybe
Yeah.
find some loot, fight a boss by yourself. You don't have to group, or maybe you need a group still for it. Anyway, that would be cool if they did that. That was one of the concerns on the Reddit post I was reading, is that they didn't want instance dungeons, right? They were expecting this PvP focused game, and now suddenly there's PvE, and they were like, well, don't make the dungeons instance then. But now they're instance.
Well, I think that would be a hard thing to do in MMO, to not make instant dungeons. And if you go in and you kill a boss on a dungeon and it's not instant, I mean, you're just going to be sitting around in the dungeon waiting for it to respawn, right? Or you're going to
Right.
just follow through people who've already, done the puzzles and things like that. It's hard to get the
Yeah.
same experience with it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I think at the very least this is going to be a great way to just kind of break up the monotony that can happen with questing in general, kind of get you out of the groove of all the fetch and kill quests, and I think there's a little bit more types of quests in New World than there are in traditional MMORPGs, but another activity is always a good thing, and even if that's just what it is, that's fine. You don't need it. I didn't go into this game expecting a lot of PvE content, and I don't think most people should either. I just think this is going to be a fun little thing to do. They talked about that the expeditions, you're still gonna have to prep. You're gonna have to bring food, potions, things like that, and prepare to actually go into the dungeon, or that's the goal at least. So I hope the tuning is tuned around that. It's not fun going into a dungeon and you just spam run through it. I want it to feel more like an adventure, and you're actually progressing with a group and trying to figure things out, and actually have to sit down and prepare for going into this higher end content, I guess, or more difficult content. So
Yeah. Well, let me go back to something you did say earlier, is that this is still a PvP focused game, right? And this is just something in addition to that, right? Something you can do to break up the monotony of leveling or playing PvP. There's still that concern there. I'm going to keep voicing this, but the concern is, I guess, is this just going to be tacked on, or is this the direction they're heading, right? And it's okay. I mean, again, some people like their PvE and some people like their PvP. I like both, but they have some interesting PvP mechanics going on here, some really cool stuff. They've already reduced it, though. They've already, now it's toggleable. Now it's not, full loot, right? And those were some cool features that I was excited about when I very first heard of New World. So now they've added these PvE systems. What are they going to focus on? Are they're going to try to balance it, or are they going to, or is this just going to be, like you said, some cool story adventures? If you want to get into the story, you can. There's some loot. and how extensive is the looting? Is this going to be, in-game content that you have to do in order to get the best loot? Or anyway, so those are just, again, it's still a concern because, is their focus pulled in two different directions?
Yeah, okay, so, and I think that's fair. I think that's a good question. I will say, though, that they had been putting some PvE into the game. And I think it's not fair to talk about expeditions without talking about corrupted breaches. So this was released back in March 18th, 2020, so this is fair for me to say. But they do have a system in the game where the corruption will seed into a specific spot, and then if it becomes unmanaged and if it starts running rampant, this is in addition, by the way, this is in addition to those those attacks that we talked about last episode. Spots on the map will then get tons of these corrupted enemies, and it says that these will be, it could be, not all corrupted breaches are created equal. They come in varying degrees of difficulty and size, and enemy defenders. Some corrupted breaches can be managed by a single player, while others will require groups of skilled combatants to complete. Make sure you're prepared for upcoming battles by crafting the acquired stuff that you need and potions to protect from the corruption. So these could be that potential raid aspect, right? That you need inside the game. We talked about, obviously they needed expeditions, they needed some sort of dungeon. That's what people are expecting from the game. But now here's this new unique sort of raiding system. I like that. That's different. That's unique.
Is this the when they're attacking your settlements, or is this different?
No, this is different. Yeah, this is a totally new thing. So you'll see on the map, when you open up your map, you'll see like this like corruption marker. And if it's not taken care of, things will start to grow and they'll grow and grow.
So you can go there.
And if it grows too much, then they'll attack the town. But you can go there and try and shut down those corrupted breaches. And those will require varying difficulties and be a little bit tough.
That sounds like well, those are pretty much dynamic world events like we were talking about, I think, last episode.
Yes.
That's cool.
The world feels, the world is breathing, and what's great is that, I mean, you think about some of this content and how it could look in future expansions. That's, to me, that's pretty exciting, because these corrupted breaches, these, the attack. Man, I cannot think of what it's called when the PvE got invasions. When the invasions happen, these are all things that could change. Like, what if one expansion, it's no longer the corrupted, maybe we beat back the corrupted and now it's the angry earth, and like that crazy bear thing that we saw in one of the trailers, that's what's attacking the gate. That would be really cool, and there's a lot of freedom I think they have to explore that.
Yeah. And I'll go back again. I'm overall excited. First of all, the look of the dungeons is great. Like, it looks cool. Like, at least the ones I've seen in videos. And
they do. They look very cool.
They look really cool. And I think there's potential for having some really cool exploration going on. Hopefully, it's not just all of them are linear. Hopefully, obviously they might be, and hopefully and I hope not. Right? I hope that there's some that you actually have to do some exploring, and you have different paths you can take, and so that brings back replayability. It's like, oh, let's do this dungeon again, but go down the other path because, it's different. I don't know, and hopefully there's actual tactical decisions in these instance dungeons. I think they have opportunities here to try some new things to make these fresh and interesting for the type of combat we have. I want to see, for example, goblins shooting from the ramparts in Moria, right down on the Fellowship, right?
Yes.
You can't get up there, so hopefully you have an archer or a musket in the group, and you're shooting back, right? And they can handle those. Like, that's tactical gameplay, because in the middle of a fight, or you're trying to cross a bridge that's collapsing, you now have arrows coming down at you. I mean, thank you, J.R.R. Tolkien, for one of the very first cool designs of a dungeon challenge. I think they could really play around with that and just not make it a like Ruko said, a run through as fast as you can and just spam kill the mobs, and then get to the bosses, spam kill them, and you're done. Get your loot, get out. I hope I hope that it's tactical, and even you have to prepare for it. Maybe you do a different build depending on the dungeon you go in after you learn what you're facing. Anyway, or
even if you have to change it on the fly. I mean, they talk about that some of these are going to have puzzles and challenges, things that you got to figure out in the moment. And I mean, okay, we live in a world where that stuff is just going to be like, what, you don't know this fight, you don't know how to solve this puzzle, then I'm going to kick you and get someone else into the group. But I hope that it gives us a sense of like, okay, we got to figure this out. What are you thinking? Because that also, to me, would be very fun to play with my buds.
If they don't have Group Finder, that's not going to be as big of an issue because you actually have to have established the group, go in, and now you're stuck. Right?
Okay, you hold on to those Group Finder thoughts. We're going to talk about Group Finder a little bit later. That's
but no, that's a good concern, and that was just a point. It's like, hey, if this is an actual, what was their first pillar, right? Attainable social experiences, right?
Yes, it was. Right.
So you actually have to group up and put in chat, type in chat, hey, looking for group, get together, say, hey, I'm new, this is my first time. Hopefully they don't kick you, or don't tell them until you get in, and then you go for it, and they have to teach you, and that's where you get those social encounters from. So anyway, just saying, if any dev is listening.
I think that's fair. I think that's a good point. And they do have, when they're building these dungeons and these expeditions, they have big shoes to fill. Games like World of Warcraft and Guild Wars and Elder Scrolls Online and Final Fantasy, they already have really cool raid mechanics and dungeon mechanics and all these things that they've been reiterating on for so many years. That New World is really kind of behind the ball and trying to figure out how do we make this really engaging and really fun for our players. But hopefully, I remember that when Final Fantasy, when it launched, it was just an absolute train wreck, right? Nobody was a fan of Final Fantasy Online when it released. But they got a new game director, and when he came in, he said, "Hey, your homework, go home and play World of Warcraft. Go look at how they do the dungeons and the raids," and they learned from that, and they made their game better than WoW, right? Isn't that a sobering thought? So I think that New World has a lot of good predecessors and can come up with some. I hope that I see really fun, engaging fights and bosses and challenges in the years ahead.
Me too. I really enjoy PvE. That's really the only reason I still play World of Warcraft is for the PvE content, and I think it can be a great thing, but I don't want it to come at the expense of the PvP for this game, because that's what they've tried to focus on, right?
Yeah.
World of Warcraft, it started off trying to do both, and it has devolved into just pretty much PvE content with a little bit of PvP. Gets updated every now and again, not very often. So I hope that it doesn't go that way. I am still very interested in the PvP side of this game, but the PvE, can be there as well without taking away from PvP. So
I agree.
So this is a little off topic, but just bear with me. So back in it must have been, I think it was the early 90s. So the company Lego was making was like, man, they were booming. Everyone was buying Lego and it was awesome and everyone loved it, right? And then they decided, hey, if everybody loves our stuff or our bricks, let's make other stuff. And they started making watches and backpacks and raincoats and all these different kinds of things. And they came back and they said, and their business almost went broke. Lego almost, hit the bottom of the barrel until they stopped and said, what are we doing? Why are we making all these other things? Let's pick our lane. We know what we're good at. We know we're good with the bricks. That's why people buy our product. Let's go back to that. And it was super, super successful. And I think that story just helps in a more business lens. But bear with me. I'm a business kind of guy. But I think that story helps iterate that sometimes you got to pick your lane and you just got to stick to it. Even though it's really tempting to go do those other things, I think expeditions, you should totally have that in your game. But as long as, like Ruka was saying, don't lose your vision. Don't lose that vision of what New World is going to be and how it's going to unfold in the years to come, because that's what's making this so exciting and so special, I think.
Yeah. And this could prove, we'll see what happens, but hopefully it's successful. And I do think they need to keep a focus on PvP for sure, because that was the original focus of the game. And I think that's going to be the majority of in-game content.
Yeah.
So they need to make sure they keep that focus.
I hope it is.
I hope so too.
If I'm being honest, so even the amount that I have had an opportunity to play, when you say, "Hey, what are we gonna do every day for endgame content?" Ah, just kicking ass and taking names, dude. Like let's take some territory. Let's level up these skills. And I think that's pretty darn cool, right? I think that's a pretty cool way. Instead of, I mean, I just some of the other MMOs that we play, I feel they kind of have a fairly repetitive end game cycle or loop. But this is kind of exciting when that end game is PvP. I'm up for that. I'm so excited for that. Okay.
I just hope that I hope that as you get closer to in game, everyone is kind of gently nudged to turn on their PvP, right? Hopefully that all the most of the in-game stuff is going to be designed around you having to toggle that PvP button so you're forced to do PvP. I mean, obviously there should be stuff for other people, I guess, but I just hope because that toggle exists, I'm worried that there's not going to be as much PvP as I hoped, and hopefully, if it's just for the leveling experience, okay, fine. You don't want to get ganked, you don't want to get corpse camped, whatever it is. I get that, but hopefully by in game, that is going to be, something that's generally on for most players. I don't know.
Okay,
Just
so let me pitch you an idea. Let me pitch you this. Okay, and I can't take credit for this because I definitely heard it when I was over in Danny's chat because I hung out with him while he was streaming the other day, and someone mentioned up this idea, and I've absolutely fallen in love with it. Let's say we own a territory, right? And then the Covenant comes and they declare war on us because we're marauders. And
wait. You want to try that again?
Okay, we're not Covenant, whatever that happens to be. They as soon as they've declared war on us, suddenly, if any Covenant member walks into our territory because we're at war, they're instantly flagged for PvP. We now have a border, and their crafters can't come into our land, and they're free game if they start coming into our land. Or what if you had just some sort of border system where you can go about your own lands worry-free, or at least sort of worry-free? You can be flagged for PvP or not flagged for PvP, but then as soon as you cross into an opposing faction's border, then it's like, okay, now it's free game. Now
this is only when you're at war, though, and this is
maybe it's whenever. I don't know. This is just an idea.
Okay, this is just an idea.
This border system idea, because I think that would be.
Well,
really
I mentioned
cool.
that in the last podcast. I think I mentioned that it would
You
would
might
be
have,
cool
yeah.
if your faction, if you actually have these factions, right? New World, you have these factions. If you go into a marauder territory and you're a syndicate, right? I mean, are you going to be automatically flagged? No, they don't have that design like that. But it would be cool if that was the case. And maybe it's only at certain times because obviously you want to be able to go around the world and quest in other areas. But I don't know, Ruka, what are your thoughts about that?
Look, I gotta wonder, like, what are you gonna do besides PvP in the end game? I mean, I know there's some end game expeditions you can go out and do, but how many times are you gonna run those before you get bored? PvP, I think is gonna be one of the content drive at the end game, right? It's not going to be this PvE centric end game, at least not right off the bat. You're going to want to engage in PvP in order to stay interested. At least that's what I'm gathering from what I've seen.
Yeah, and remember, we still have those 3 territories that you cannot claim that are end zone territories, including
Right.
Shattered Mountain. So
Yeah.
there's still more going on up there that's very end game related that we're just not engaging with.
Hopefully
at the
those
That's
are
true. There is still a lot
automatic
we don't know
PvP.
about,
So,
but
Those
I,
should be
I
auto
doubt it.
PvP toggles. Yeah, well, we'll see.
I think it would be great, but I mean, I understand people who just want to come experience the lore and come experience the PvE content, and that's fine. If you want to come experience it and do it, that's great. But I hope most people are coming to the game with the PvP expectation. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, I have 2 questions then, kind of on the same line here. One, and maybe I don't know if this is common knowledge, Slacker, but when can you toggle for PvP or PvE? Is it only in towns or is?
Yes, it is. Only when you're in a town.
Okay, good. And then the other question is, and this is just for your guys' opinions, is what do you guys think about all towns being neutral zones?
I think it's fine.
I don't know. I think I'm not a huge fan of it, to be honest. I think 1 or 2 being totally neutral would be fine. But I think it kind of devalues having control of the territory, right?
Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah. I think it would be
Okay.
really cool if you had if you controlled this territory, you were the only ones who gained access to the town, and maybe
Or
that.
anyone from your faction. From
Sure.
other companies, that's great, but they have to be your faction,
Well,
right?
and maybe even these, towns have something unique about them. Maybe the vendors only sell something unique for this town. So if you control it, your faction is the only one with access to it, and that also encourages other factions to start
To try to take over.
try and take
Yeah.
over it. But I mean, at the same time, I'm going to play devil's advocate myself, and people
I was
who-
gonna play. I'll be your devil's
Oh.
advocate. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just gonna say, I mean, on the other side, if you don't control that town and you don't have access to whatever the unique thing, you're probably very unhappy about it, right? And maybe, I mean, with another faction to compete for that town as well, if you have 3 factions competing for the same area, I mean, there's a chance that you may not gain access to that for a very long time.
Well, boo-hoo. This
I
is
know,
New
oh,
World.
boo-hoo, right?
We're pirates, not
All right. Let me
Like I
also
said,
play
playing
devil's
devil's
advocate to that
advocate,
kind of
yeah,
a
go
system
ahead.
because I think that having a neutral town system is good, and this is why. And this is way off topic for what we're talking about today. Alex. We're gonna
Sorry.
get back on track here in just a second, but so. Let's say that we've built our company and we're holed up in Everfall, right? This is our town. I've built a player house in there. We are working together to make sure all the crafting tiered benches are leveling up. We have town projects we're working on. We're defending off these things, and things kind of slow down for a little bit, and an opposing faction suddenly takes over the town. And now suddenly I can't get to my player housing. I can't get to all these things that we had invested so much time. Suddenly all those things are kind of stripped from me. And I know what you're saying, boo-hoo, we're pirates, right? but I think that doesn't feel challenging. I think that feels punishing, if that makes sense. And I think there's a fine line there. So
All right, fair enough.
I like this, that means like, oh, we gotta fight for it because we hate that these guys have now rolled in. We've lost all of these benefits that we used to have for controlling it, and we've set up shop here. Like, this is our town. So now we want to make sure our covenant, or our faction, sorry, we're definitely not covenant, but we want to make, we're probably marauders, if I'm being honest.
No.
We want to make sure that we want to make sure that our faction is the one that controls it so that we get all the benefits and all the rewards because we're vested here. And I like that tug of war more than I like the idea of, ooh, this is a hostile town, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, honestly, ultimately, maybe they could have made the choice up to the company, I feel like the more
that would be kind of cool. Immigration laws?
Right. The more questions you like that, when it comes down to this PvP system with controlling territories, the more things you give to the players to choose, I think the better, because it makes that game feel so unique. But again, that could also cause lots of problems. We're not the developers here. Obviously, there's a lot of things we're probably missing. But I would just say generally as a rule, give those choices to the companies that control it, because maybe you want a hostile town for whatever reason, and maybe that is a negative in some ways and a positive in others,
That's a really good point. And I really like that because one of the reasons Sea of Thieves is one of my favorite games is because what they do is they give you a bunch of tools and let the players decide. And they say, here's the world, here's how you interact with it, go nuts. And then the players are deciding how they play the game and how they interact with the world and what that world means to them. And I agree with you, and I think this is kind of in line with what you're talking about, Big Papa. I think this is in that same vein, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, okay. Ruko, did you have something else you wanted to add there?
I was just going to say I thought it felt a little odd that these other factions you're essentially supposed to be at war with, you're just casually walking into their town
Right.
and interacting with their people like normal, right? That seems a little strange, but
hey, how's that going to work in combat? If I'm flagged for PvP and I'm like, I'm killing you, and then I run into your town, it's like,
right.
am I safe now?
I mean, what kind of scumbag is going to do that?
You,
But
you, Ruko. We all know.
No.
Okay, let's get back on topic here. All right, expeditions. Here we go. We're back. Okay, so let's talk about some of the lore behind the two of the expeditions that have been shared with us in a little bit more detail. So we have the Amrine excavation. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm pretty sure it's Amrine. And then the Garden of Genesis. And so I'm going to read these little blurbs and talk a little bit about what each of these would mean, because one of the things that Dungeons or Expeditions has really allowed MMOs to do is to tell their story, is to give you things to care about, is to give you bad guys that you hate, is to give you experiences that are memorable, right? And so I will say, if you watch the Expeditions 101 YouTube video on the New World's official YouTube page, the content there shows that it is really beautiful, these dungeons. It's giving a very unique look, and if you watch some of the playthroughs of people who had experienced or kind of gone through some of these things or done these expeditions, their general consensus was it was really good. I want it to be more challenging, but it was beautiful. It was really interesting to engage with, and they were really they were cool dungeons. So the Amrine excavation is a dig site just west of Amrine Temple, where the famed archaeologist Simon Gray and his team had been missing for some time. It's up to players to venture into the depths of this troubled dig site to uncover their fate and discover what happened with the ancient technology they unearthed. So what I really love about this one particularly is I feel like they've almost got a like a 40K vibe about the ancients, right? We call it magic, but the ancients had some sort of technology that they've been using, and these archaeologists are trying to figure it out. But we are so removed from whatever the heck that was, is that we're deciphering it as magic, but we're trying to figure out who were the ancients? What were they doing? How long has it been since they've been gone? Why are they gone? All these questions still need to be answered, and this is hopefully going to give us a little glimpse into that. If you watch the New World trailer, you'll see the ancient architecture really frequently throughout Aeternum, right? It's kind of all over the place, but it's decaying, it's broken, it's busted, it's shattered, whatever. So they're this long gone mysterious force that maybe they had really high tech stuff, but it's so beyond us that we decipher it as magic. I really like that, especially for something that's taking place during the Age of Exploration, right? Because that was something that was like, if you couldn't explain it, boom, witchcraft. Like, we're gonna burn you. You're a witch. You can't explain it, neither can we. I think that's kind of a fun theme to play around with.
It reminds me of the Dwemer, I think is what they're called from Elder Scrolls.
Skyrim. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Dwemer were this. They were really technologically advanced group of elves. They were kind of like, you know, the dwarves, because they went deep into the ground and they made machines and all that. And they disappeared, you know, suddenly. And that's part of the lore of the game, and really cool, honestly, really cool lore. And it's whenever you go into their like ancient cities or dungeons, it's so creepy. It's so like, it's got this air of like, what the heck is going on? And you're fighting
something that once
metal
was
machines. What was that?
That something of what was.
Right. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I like that. And I'm gonna call it right now. Aeternum is a machine. I'm just gonna say it's probably a machine. We'll find out someday.
You think so?
I'm calling it now. It's a machine.
Interesting theory.
That's how it moves around the Atlantic.
That would be. Oh, I'm putting back of a turtle.
Back of a turtle? Come on.
Back of a turtle.
No.
Come on, that's such a classic. The turtle swims around the ocean, and that's why you can never find it.
You can't see the turtle in the water. I mean, yeah, that's
no. Is that
that's
whole island
out of World of
That's
Warcraft.
also Avatar: The Last Airbender.
No, it's not just out of World. Thank you. Yes, that's not a World of Warcraft thing. That's a Chinese mythology thing for sure.
Okay,
we have someone
fine.
else from one of our community. They're saying Atlantis.
Yeah.
That Aeternum is Atlantis. I like that idea too. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, well, especially if we're like, again, we're talking about this technology that was so advanced, but it's so ancient now that we're looking at it, you know, saying, "Oh, it's magic." It reminds me of literally Atlantis, the Disney movie, right?
Well, I'm gonna go rewatch Stargate Atlantis. When's the last time you watched that show? right?
By the way, that is
Sci-fi original right there.
yeah.
I do hope there's no science fiction in this game. I think that would feel really out of place. There's a lot of other cool historical fantasy we can go into.
Well, I think Elder Scrolls did it well. I mean, it wasn't really science fiction, but it's definitely
it's something
it fit
different.
into
it's
the
that,
it fit into the world and the setting they created.
And we do have gunpowder. I mean, we got to remember, like, technology's not it makes more sense that there would be a Zeppelin in this game than there would make sense that there is a Zeppelin in World of Warcraft. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Like,
well, we're on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution here, essentially, and
right.
maybe more steampunky things could be introduced. That'd
be cool. Okay, let's go into the next dungeon that was kind of talked about. Okay, first of all, Amrine Excavation is a level 25 introductory expedition. It's got puzzles, and the AI is scaled accordingly. So you can anticipate Amrine Excavation to be one of the first dungeons that you participate in, and it actually comes up pretty quick. Level 25, you're gonna get up there. Well, we'll see. We'll see how quickly you get there, but it's gonna be one of the first ones you hit. It's your dead mines, right?
Yeah. Were you able to run it in the alpha?
I can't say.
What?
I won't say.
Okay, fine.
Well, now you're just being obstinate, man.
Yeah,
I suppose. Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. The second one, which I definitely have not done, because this one is a level 60 expedition, and it's definitely endgame content. They've said, hey, this one will be much more challenging and much more for the much more experience. Is the Garden of Genesis. So, in Eden Grove, survivalist Elwood has discovered a garden where the angry earth are born. Like the rest of Eden Grove, the garden has been infected with a mysterious blight. If allowed to spread, the blight will continually leach out of the garden and threaten the inhabitants of Aeternum. Players must face the garden's protectors in order to penetrate the nursery's primordial heart, purge the blight, and begin the garden's restoration.
It sounds like, I imagine it's not the case, but it sounds like, wait, is this blight going to grow if no group from your, goes and takes care of it in that territory?
Well, you got to remember,
I'm sure it
no,
won't.
Because it's instance, it's
Probably
not going to go.
not.
But
Yeah,
I'm just saying
not.
that could be a cool aspect, right? If they're trying to encourage people to, have to deal with it. But yeah, it probably wouldn't work for instance dungeons.
Okay, then I think the other big question we have to be asking here is blight not the same thing as corruption? So what is blight? And how is it different from corruption? So corruption has been that main bad guy, right? That main thing that we're contending against, that we're pushing back. And now the angry earth has blight that it's dealing with. And first of all, do we want to even save angry earth? Like, it's angry.
Well, we need to at least keep it at bay, right? I mean, that's, I'm guessing, the point of the dungeon. At least keep it at bay. So,
like, the bad guy's got its own bad guy. So let's go, enemy of my enemy is my friend, isn't it?
I get, or you can just have more than one enemy. I mean, sometimes.
Yeah, I guess.
No, I like
Okay, that's fair.
I like the different systems here, right? You got corrupted,
Yeah.
which takes over the living, and then the blight sounds like it just kills things, and maybe makes the earth angry, right?
Well, it certainly tells a more engaging story when you have more bad guys that you got to be fighting
right.
off.
Different factions, different mystical
Yeah.
forces that you have to combat, right?
So I like this. Now, the content inside for the Garden of Genesis is awesome. I think Angry Earth stuff is one of my favorites inside of New World. I really like the motif of everything, but I think Angry Earth has its own little look that's unique, but still very natural in nature, and like the stag and the bear when they're fighting. Like I really like that. So I'm really excited for this one. It's a pretty standard go purge the blight. And maybe this is just something that's contained within this instance, but I really hope we see this as a reoccurring theme.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it'd be good. I'm assuming blight is different from corruption, and the more you kind of have going on the island, I think is going to be good, at least for content and lore. I mean, there's probably a lot of weird things going on Aeternum, so yeah, I'm excited to see how this unravels and where they go with it.
Just a quick question. So they said it's more challenging than other dungeons. Is it more
Yeah,
challenging because you're at a higher level,
that's a
and
good
therefore
question.
it's more challenging because you're facing higher level mobs, or is it because the actual dungeon itself and the challenges and puzzles within it is more challenging? That's I don't know if they answered that, but that's what I'm curious about when they say
I'm
that.
hoping it's the latter.
Me
I'm
too.
assuming this is supposed to be like an end game dungeon, so maybe you hit 60 and you even need to get a little bit of gear to go in and successfully complete it. That would be my hope. And that would at least give people who just want to focus on the PvE side of the game a little bit more to do when they hit max level. So
Yeah, it will be one. These dungeons are there will be 6 expeditions at launch that you'll be able to participate in, and I think only 3 of them are end game. It might only be 2.
Mm. I just on the flip side, is hopefully some of the lower level dungeons are. I just hope they don't make them all easy just because they're lower level. I hope they all have their own unique
Well,
challenges,
let
and
me check
obviously
some
you
of the
want an
wording
easy
here.
dungeon spread out here and there. What was that?
Let me just check some of the wording here. Okay, so this is what it says on their official site. It says, with these higher level expeditions, players can expect to solve different types of puzzles, fight varying AI, and have even more challenging experiences.
For the higher
I
level
don't know.
ones.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I don't know how telling that is or not, but I also like I was saying before, one of the issues that I have, and I think Big Papa, you had this issue as well with World of Warcraft's dungeons, is when you first start playing the dungeons, they're just a push in retail at least. They're just a pushover. You're just crushing through it. You're just you're not even paying attention to any of the mechanics. I want challenging experiences when I go into dungeons.
Mm.
I love the lore. I love the experience. I want it to be tough. I want it to be something that I want to do with my buddies and not just like rando, because I want to make sure that we can all jump on Discord and get through it.
Right. I
So
agree. I don't want the lower level dungeons just to be the push through, beat the boss kind. Right. I still want there to
right,
be
yeah.
challenge there. I agree.
Those challenges in WoW, they do happen, but they don't happen until Mythic, until far in the end game, until you're halfway down the end game line, and I think that's that's a lost opportunity. I think. All right, we're getting short on time, so we're gonna dive into our opinion segment, which is always our longest one. So this episode is definitely going to be going over. So we want to talk about. Oh well, maybe not. What we want to talk about now for our opinion segment is about dungeon design. Is how do we enjoy. So let me start with this one. Let me just open this conversation up by asking, do we prefer dungeons that are much more D&D Skyrim focused, where you're watching out for traps and you're being cautious through the next corridor and suddenly monsters break out off the walls and you got to fight them? Or do we prefer the much more boss focused approach, where it's clear the trash, focus on the boss, clear the trash, focus on the boss? What do we prefer?
I prefer both. I don't know why you can't have both within the dungeon. You can have all of these really cool things where you're exploring the dungeon and still have bosses, and maybe even secret bosses for those who are willing to explore the dungeon further or solve some of its secrets. Um, and there's a lot of opportunities to do that. World of Warcraft doesn't do that very well. I mean, they sometimes have little things here and there within their dungeons that you can kind of activate, or you kind of have to play around with to get to do something, but it's not nearly as fun because they're just very linear and you're just kind of on a set path, right? I want to be able to explore the dungeons, but I also want to be able to fight
Right.
some cool bosses because a lot of times those are where a lot of the lore opportunities happen. What's going on in the dungeon? Why are these big bad guys here? And how do we stop them? Right? So I would prefer dungeons that do both of these things, but I think there's a lot more design work that has to go into getting the dungeon to work like that.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with Fruko. I think you could do both. I think, like I said earlier, they could easily have your instance dungeons and then your non-instance that are something you discover as you explore the world. And maybe you go in and you're exploring it, and it branches off into multi tunnels, and you find bandits inside, and it's way too hard, so you get killed, so you have to go back and tell your friends, I found this place, let's go explore it together. That would be cool, and you do run the risk of it becoming really well known, obviously, and then you just run into other PvP, other player groups. But if it worked right, maybe if there was a cap on players on the server, right, and they were able to make it big enough that there's a lot to explore, I think it could be a really fun thing. Something like a Skyrim dungeon where you go, you walk out, and spoiler, you see this giant bone dragon sitting in this, in front of this giant city that's under the ground. That's really cool. That's obviously how much they have to put a lot of development into that and whatnot, but it would be something really cool in this kind of game to see that. But there's also something to be said for your traditional, just go through, find the big baddie and kill him, right? And make that challenging, and a challenging boss encounter. So yeah, I like both, and I think this game could do both. So I hope that we see both in this game.
Okay, so I disagree.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. I feel that you need to, I think this is one of those things where you kind of need to pick a lane, or you need to figure out how you're incentivizing your players. We live in an age where it's just way too freaking easy to say, okay, where's the reward that I need? It's here, and here. It's at this boss, this boss, this boss. All I want to do, clear those bosses, boom, I'm done, and then I'm gonna go do it again, and then I'm gonna do it again, I'm gonna do it again. Like I hate that. I think that I think you need to cultivate a culture, or maybe not a culture, maybe that's the wrong word. You need to set how these approaches are, how you set this up, and say, okay, now go after it. I'm trying to figure out how.
So which side are you leaning?
Which side are
you leaning to then? Are you leaning towards boss or exploration?
For New World, I would prefer exploration. I'm tired of the boss stuff. I hate it that the trash doesn't feel exciting. It feels like trash. It feels like I gotta clear 15 minutes of enemies who will drop no reward in order for me to get to the boss who might drop a reward. Instead, I really enjoy the exploration. So for example, we're playing Valheim. We find a new tunnel. We say, oh gosh, okay, let's get we don't know what to expect. Let's get potions. Let's make sure we have our weapons are repaired. Let's make sure we're ready to go because we have no idea what's going to be down there. And then we go down, right? And then it's like, okay, what's down this corridor? Well, hey, watch my back because we got to make sure no monsters come out of this other hallway. And that, I think, to me, is far more exciting to play through than to slam through all the trash, get to the boss, sit and say, okay, who knows the fight? Who doesn't know the fight? This is how you do the fight. Here, okay, now we do it. Did you get a reward? No, sorry, you didn't. All right, let's go clear another 5 to 8 minutes worth of trash. But don't worry, we're going to give you just a little bit of currency. So if you kill this boss 40 more times, then you'll be able to get a piece of gear anyway. I'm just over that, right? I'm just done with it. So
I'm over it too.
If we could pull,
but they're already doing that. That's the thing is like. Well, okay, and I haven't done the dungeon,
why
so I can't
say.
But it looks
why can't
like
a dungeon be procedurally generated?
Fair enough.
Well, why can't you give me the Valheim dungeons? Come on, a couple of guys made that in their basement. Give me, because that was really exciting. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what was going to be in there. Scale it to the levels of the area and let us go down and try and figure out the dungeon or the labyrinth. That way, I'm not watching reviews online for 20, 30 minutes before I go play my game to make sure I know what to do when I get inside the group.
I agree.
I'm ranting. I understand that I'm ranting here, but just bear with me.
I agree. I think that would be awesome. I'm with you. The problem is I think half the reason I say both is because they're already going for it seems like the boss dungeons, right? Where you go through and you beat your boss and and hopefully they make those interesting. But yeah, I'm hoping they could. There might be dungeons designed around what you're exactly talking about, where it's just about the exploration.
Yeah, that's one where I want my best buds at my back because we don't know what's down there. I don't want some random person to join me. I don't want to group finder into this. Okay, and after this, you can talk about group finder, but I don't want to group finder my way into a group and just like, okay, let's just smash through this. No, I want to be calculated. Either. I want to prepare. I want to go through the gauntlet and then come out the other side and be like, I didn't get anything, but I had a great time killing the dungeon. It wasn't trash to me. It was fun. It was engaging.
Well, and again, I mean, I don't understand why you can't have both. When you talk about like exploratory, and you talk about like procedural generation, you got to be really careful because procedural generation is a lot harder to accomplish than it sounds. And if you do something like a procedurally generated dungeon, you're really limited on what you can and can't do with that dungeon. And even if you go into a procedurally generated dungeon, it's still going to feel familiar-ish. Even if you don't know the exact path, you're still going to, and you'll explore around. I mean, the setting is going to be essentially the same, right? Everything's
Yeah.
going to kind of
Yeah.
look the same. I know a lot of people like procedural generation because they think it's going to add a lot of replay value. But I think what adds replay value is more the epic encounters. Now I agree I don't want to fight 15 minutes worth of trash just to get to a boss. So you can remove trash and you can have some exploratory stuff within a dungeon and still make a boss fight really fun within the dungeon. Maybe even just one boss within a dungeon, and you leave the rest up to exploratory. Maybe you're trying to figure out, maybe you're chasing a boss into this dungeon or something. I don't know, and you're trying to figure out which path he took, right? And to find out, maybe that changes every time, and you have to figure it out as you go along.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ideas you could play around with. Um, I just don't feel like a dungeon is complete without a real boss encounter, at least in my opinion. I mean, you can.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, you can explore and do stuff, but how is that much different from exploring the open world?
The open world, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well. Okay, but it does. I don't know. It's like, I mean, Skyrim kind of did it, and you know, obviously it's a different game because it's a single player RPG, right? But
Yeah.
you go through and you explore it for the first time, and maybe it's kind of labyrinthian and it's expansive and it's really cool, and you explore it all to its last room. And you're like, wow, that was cool. There was some cool encounters, maybe some puzzles, and I found this ancient secret, and oh, this is cool. And maybe it starts a quest line or something, and then 10 levels later, you get a quest that makes you go back down in there, and now there's different events you're encountering. So I would say even that first experience is awesome. Just going and exploring something that's in the world, but not and then having to go back in later is just like the cherry on top. Is like maybe you can design quests around it or different PvP even content around. I don't know. I don't know how it would work, but
Well, and
you
that's
could do
and
things
that's
like
what
that.
that's what procedural generated means to me, though. That right there, the fact that I can't just look that up online. I can't just Google how to beat this dungeon. I gotta go in on my toes. I gotta go. This is a fresh experience every time I enter it, and that's what I want to capture for it. Just to clarify from what I was talking about earlier, when I want that procedural generated, what I'm really asking for, I want an exploratory experience. I want a dungeon to explore. I want villains that I don't anticipate. I don't want to have to find this stuff online, and I don't want to be asked like, hey, I need you to go watch it online before you engage with this content.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you do that, you're going to hit a point where you've seen all the possibilities, at least in terms of maybe villains or things you can hit. Maybe the dungeon's still procedural, but you're going to get tired of it after a while. We talked about the Valheim dungeons. Yeah, it's cool the first couple times you go down there, but by the fifth or sixth one, you're like, I've seen this before. I know what's going to happen. There's a couple of hallways. There's some things maybe I need to mine. Yada yada yada. It's kind of all the same. I think it's hard to introduce a rewarding and replayable procedurally generated exploratory type experience. I'm not opposed to exploratory type experience at all. I think you could do something like Indiana Jones style, right, where you're going deep into a cave to retrieve some sort of treasure, right, with traps, and maybe you don't need a boss at something like that. But I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of procedural generation, at least not with where we're at least not for dungeons.
Well, and not for this game
That's
necessarily.
fair.
I mean, we're too far
Yeah.
in, but I do
Sure.
agree that I think the idea Slacker is trying to talk about here, and that you've also mentioned, is it's about the exploration, right? It's about not necessarily needing an instance, or whether it's instance or not necessarily needing a boss in there. That's the end goal that has loot you try to get. It's not about the replayability of it. It's about the first encounter with it and your exploration of it. And maybe there's things that send you back in there, right, to make it nostalgic, right? It's like, oh, I remember when I found this at level 10 and I explored this, and now I'm level 30 and I'm going in because there's this someone was captured and taken in here by band. I don't know, but that exploratory nature and the fact that it exists in the world, and that would that's cool.
So one thing I'm thinking about right now are the tall tales from Sea of Thieves. Now, those aren't actual dungeons necessarily, but a lot of times they send you on this kind of journey with your group to go do something, and those feel kind of like a dungeon experience, at least to me, what it should be like.
They do, for sure.
Yeah. You go out on a journey, you're finding clues, you're trying to unravel a mystery, and maybe you fight a boss, or you get a treasure at the end. And I think that kind of goes to show you can do both. You can have a boss at the end, but you can have this great journey of exploration along the way. And I think those are a good length that you can actually replay them. You don't necessarily remember all of them. I don't like when dungeons are super short because you get tired of them so fast. I like to sink a little bit more time into some of these dungeons and actually take the time to learn about them, and actually have some replayable value, more than just doing it 5 times very quickly and then I'm done with it forever.
Yeah. Okay, so we are pushing on time. That is going to be a wrap for our episode today. A big thank you for Ruko and Big Papa for joining me today. This has been one of those topics that I think we're all pretty passionate about, and I'm really excited to see what the future of New World looks like with expeditions, and even potentially what raiding might look like, especially with this combat system. I think that's also extremely unique and something that will be worth exploring in the future. So next week we will have Danny here. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things. So tune in next week. We're really excited. Make sure you join our Discord channel, follow us on Twitter or wherever else you engage with us, and get part of the conversation as we set up into Aeternum. Join us. We're going to have a lot of fun playing this, and we've had a lot of fun putting this together. So big thank you from myself, Slacker, and Big Papa.
We'll see you later.
And Ruko.
Bye, everyone.